blood isn't real. She isn't real. Survivor's guilt. That's what the therapist had said it was. Hallucinations brought on by guilt that manifested during sleep paralysis. But if that were true, why did her hand sliding up my thigh beneath the covers feel so real?
Do you still think about me, baby?
She rolled her tongue through the hole in her cheek where the asphalt had chewed her face. I tried to close my eyes. Dear God, did I try? But the paralysis wouldn't let me. A tear rolled down my temple as she teased at the waistband of my boxers. She cackled, spattering blood on my neck.
Come on, tell me, don't you miss me?
A scream bubbled in my throat, threatening to choke me. She leaned down to kiss me. Her flesh hung loosely to reveal porcelain-white cheekbones. But just as her ruined lips grazed mine, I felt the invisible pressure lift from my limbs.
No, no, no!
I belted, finally gaining control of my body and leaping from the mattress, swinging my arms wildly in the air. But she was already gone. A sinister giggle floated through the room, tickling at my earlobe. I wiped it away as a shiver crept down my spine. Evelyn. I did my breathing exercises to calm down. It was something I found online that was part of a holistic treatment for PTSD. In, then out. I had to stop pretending she wasn't real. In, then out. Because she was, and it wasn't helping by denying it. In, then out. I was being punished, and I deserved every bit of it. I rubbed my eyes and let out a couple of deep sobs. Then I got my shit together. Because that's what people do. They get on with it. I tucked the fear away in a box deep within the recesses of my mind for another time. Suppression was something I'd gotten quite good at over the past year. I went to the mirror and scrubbed my neck with a hot washcloth. The blood had disappeared with her, but I could almost feel its sticky warmth still on my skin. Thoughts of her when she was alive flooded my mind. I closed my eyes and saw long blonde hair blowing in the breeze, her palm against my cheek smelling of lilacs. Freckles danced along her arm on a lovely tapestry of pale skin. She was so beautiful then. I'm so sorry, Evie. And I always would be. I muscled down the memory and got dressed. A few minutes later, I was bursting through the revolving door of my apartment complex and lighting a cigarette, taking a long drag as I headed down Main Street. I had a new client to meet, a possible missing person. Those really weren't my bag anymore, always complicated. At best, it was just someone who didn't want to be found, enjoying a new chapter of their life. And at worst, it was a shallow grave near the roadside. But more often than not, it was a string of dead ends that never went anywhere. Unsolved. I didn't think about Evie on the drive. I just let my mind fill with static as city blocks turned into cornfields, flipping my sobriety chip over and over again through my fingers. God damn, did I want a drink. I pulled up to a cottage home tucked away behind a row of pine trees. Honeysuckle bushes grew among them, erupting like flowery vests adorned on their trunks. It looked peaceful. Sometimes I thought I could leave my apartment and investigative services behind in the city and move out here to the country, live in a place like this. Maybe I'd earn an honest living, something simple, get my hands dirty and clean my soul at the same time. Maybe someday I will, if I live long enough. My shoes echoed off the cobblestone path as I let the thought simmer a little longer in my head. It was a pleasant idea, and I didn't have those very often. The door opened so quickly my fist was still in the air as I was greeted by a middle-aged woman with silvery gray hair wearing business casual attire. I quickly lowered it into an offering of a handshake, and she shook it enthusiastically.
Mr. Taylor, I'm glad you made it out. Please, come in.
It was a beautiful drive. I haven't been out of the city in some time.
Oh, really? You should do it more often. It would probably be good for you.
I nodded my head in agreement as I followed her lead through the foyer and into the den. It was a large room lined with bookshelves stuffed with colorful spines of novels shouldered by spider plants. She gestured for me to sit at a small table that already had drinks and an array of cheeses and crackers laid out. "So, Mrs. Blake, what is it that I can do for you?" I asked, taking a sip of coffee from a mug she offered me. I grimaced. It was entirely too sweet. I liked it bitter.
"Well, as I said on the phone, my daughter, Natalie, has gone missing, and I'd like you to find her."
She flashed a smile, but I could see the frustration that lay underneath it.
"But aren't the police looking into the matter?" "No, they aren't doing a damn thing."
The warm, polite expression she wore faltered into a scowl, revealing deep lines in her forehead.
"Why not?" "Well, it's only been a few days." "How old is she?" 22. She graduates from UC this fall."
Standard procedure in Ohio for anyone over the age of 21 is to wait 7 days before they can be officially declared a missing person.
"Oh, damn it! I don't want to hear that again. My daughter is missing. Something is wrong. I know it. I can feel it in here."
She hissed, standing from her chair and jabbing the center of her chest with her index finger. I didn't respond and let her pace the room before coming to a stop at the bay windows. She released a heavy sigh and fussed at the wrinkles in her suit pants. "Okay, Mrs. Blake, take me through it. Tell me everything you told them," I relented, stuffing a wedge of Gouda in my mouth. It was an odd time to eat, but I figured it would be rude not to.
"The last time I spoke with her was Sunday. She sounded off. Something wasn't right."
"Did she say anything in particular that caused you to feel like something was wrong?"
"No, not really. It was just in her voice. She sounded nervous, like she did when she was a little kid, and she wanted to tell me something but was too afraid to do so."
"You didn't ask?"
"No. I'd been accused of being too invasive before, a prying mother, and I didn't want to have that kind of relationship with her."
"And you haven't heard from her since?"
"No,"
she whispered. The frustration on her face faded as visible sadness touched her eyes. "Mrs. Blake, did Natalie have any habits of disappearing before? Maybe taking off with some friends for a long weekend, perhaps a vacation with a love interest, where she might not be responsive to your phone calls?"
"Absolutely not. Sure, Nat could be whimsical sometimes, but she's never just vanished for 4 days without saying a word to me. Her own best friend hasn't heard from her, and they're inseparable."
"Did you check with the university?"
"I did. They said she hadn't been to her classes so far this week, and her roommate hasn't seen her in the dorm since last Sunday night."
I took a minute to chew on a cracker and have a quick inner debate on whether I really wanted to take the case or not. It would either be messy or it would be nothing and over before it actually began. I was betting on the latter, but the worry emanating from the woman in front of me was palpable. Maybe I was a sucker, but it made me think of my own mother and all the hell I put her through. So I made the only decision that felt right. Well, I am intrigued, Mrs. Blake, for certain. But in this type of situation, I have to tell you the majority of the time, this case would likely resolve with her showing back up in a few days, apologizing, and saying she's met someone or that she was burnt out and needed a trip down to Panama City. But, I held up my hands as her mouth hung open, halting her rebuke. I also never bet against the intuition of a mother. So, I'm going to look into this for you for the next 3 days. At which point, first thing Monday, I want you to file a missing persons report, and I will turn over any information I have to the detective assigned to the case.
"Oh, thank you, Mr. Taylor."
She looked as if she wanted to hug me, but I held up another hand to stop that too. Now, I can't work for free. My rate is firm as we discussed on the phone, and I have to tell you, I'll probably get in a little heat with the local PD for coming in before they got their hands on it. Most people don't hire me until the police have exhausted all resources.
"Oh, I understand. Just find my daughter, please."
I will try my best, Mrs. Blake. Now, please let the university know I'll be there in the next couple of hours, and make sure you call me immediately if you hear anything from your daughter. She nodded her head fervently in agreement. After an exchange of pleasantries and another barrage of thank yous, I was in my truck and on my way back to the city I'd just left. I drove in silence for a while, mulling over the conversation in my head. I still thought she should have waited the 7 days and gone through the proper channels. But, truth be told, I needed the money. And not only that, but I needed a case that kept me busy. And when I was busy, that thirst of mine faded to a buzzing in the background. A distraction. And distractions were a way of survival. The security guard whistled as he paced the hall while the dorm RA shuffled anxiously in the doorway.
Is she in some kind of trouble? Not at all. Just need to collect a couple of her things, as her mother said.
I nosed through the papers on her desk, all class notes it seemed. Her handwriting was in cursive and incredibly neat, but nothing that stood out as unusual. The desk drawers only contained stacks of pencils, highlighters, and empty notebooks, plus a few sticks of lip gloss. Her laptop lay on the nightstand next to her bed. I grabbed it and the charger and tucked them under my arm. There would surely be something useful that lay within it. In the spirit of being thorough, I flipped over her pillows and rifled through her sheets, but they were clean. Then I swiped my arm underneath her mattress and...
Hello, what's this?
I whispered. It was a small leather notebook. This journal belongs to Natalie Blake. Jackpot. I grinned and quickly stuffed it into my jacket pocket.
All right, I got what I needed. Thanks,
I gestured a thumb at the gangly young man.
Tom. It's Tom.
His voice cracked.
Yeah, Tom, thanks.
The security guard escorted me off the grounds, telling stories about how he had been this close to becoming a real police officer when he was younger. I told him he was better off here, and he didn't disagree. I tossed the laptop in the passenger seat and hopped behind the wheel, taking a moment to thumb through the journal before turning the keys in the ignition. It was page after page of that neat handwriting again, until I got closer to today's date. Then the writing got messy. Chicken scratch that was worse than mine. The last entry was dated Saturday, April 15th. Did some more digging on the forums. The meeting is still on for tomorrow night. I'm afraid, but I need to see it. I've dreamt about it every night since I saw the picture. It's beyond research at this point. I want to see what they worship. I want to see the void. The next few pages were consumed with crudely drawn pictures of a dark circle. A black hole endlessly consuming stardust out in space was the first thing that came to mind. I felt a tingling at the base of my skull as I looked at them. A strange pressure built up in my ears that sounded like a distant humming, and I could almost feel some sort of vibration in my fingertips that was emanating from the page. Jesus Christ! I gasped, dropping the journal in my lap. I fumbled for my cell phone. Yeah? I croaked.
Hey, Tony, did you call me?
Oh, hey, yeah. I shook off the eerie feeling and shoved Natalie's journal in the cup holder.
You good, man?
Yeah, all good. Hey, I'm on a case, missing person. Need you to crack into a laptop for me. You got time?
If you got the dime, I got the time.
All right, I'll drop it off in a bit. I glanced at the journal once more. It seemed almost menacing now, like something I shouldn't have opened. What were you into, Natalie? I suddenly didn't think this case would be as simple as I thought it would be. Maybe her mother was right to worry. I fired up the truck and made my way uptown.
Hey, Tony!
A cheerful, portly man stood in the doorway of his apartment, shaking his hands in the air enthusiastically to welcome me.
Hey, Spencer. Come in, man. Sorry about the mess.
I followed him back to his spare bedroom, or as he called it, the lair, kicking through empty beer cans and pizza boxes. Spencer was a 30-something-year-old man that acted like he'd mentally always be 19. I'd helped him get off on some bogus charges with the local PD about 10 years ago, and he's been working with me ever since as a consultant.
I'd offer you a beer, but I know you don't drink no more. You, want a soda or something? Nah, I'm good,
I replied, placing Natalie's laptop on the edge of his desk.
All right, all business tonight. Got it. What do we have?
He gave me a salute and flipped the laptop open.
College student. Mom's worried about her whereabouts. I just need access to her computer. Want to look through her browsing history, her documents, you know, the usual. Got it.
He fired up his own PC and plugged in a USB cable and a thumb drive to hers.
How long do you think it'll take?
I yawned, rubbing my eyes and suddenly feeling the weight of the day.
Let's see. College kid, young gal. Her password is probably something like her family dog's name plus the year she was born or something. I'd say less than 5 minutes once I get the program running. Good.
I slumped down into a grease-stained sofa and let Spencer do his thing. He lived like a farm animal, but he was damn good at what he did. I pulled out my cell and tried to do a little Googling. I tried just void first. Nothing but legal definitions. How about the void? A couple cheesy horror movies and a virtual reality group offering a space travel experience. Worship the Void, a record company based out of the UK. I sighed and tucked the phone back into my pocket. I knew it wouldn't be that easy, of course, but you had to start in the simplest places first, because sometimes you got lucky. Several times as a young PI, I immediately dove into the complicated and abstract, not unlike a conspiracy theorist, just to find out days later that the answer had been right in front of me all along. Start with one pin and then add one string to the board at a time. Keep it clean. I rested my head back on the couch. My body felt heavy and my bones ached for sleep. I was just starting to get that floating feeling you get when you're in between this world and dreamland, when Spencer let loose a hearty laugh from the other side of the room.
Is it done? Yes, sir. 4 minutes and 27 seconds. Good work.
I stood and stretched.
I changed your password to Spencer Rules 99 because I do, and I always party like it's 1999.
He beamed at me, doing a little shuffle dance in his rolling chair. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill and stuffed it into his hand.
Thank you, sir. Good doing business with you.
He slid it under his keyboard and slipped his gaming headset on.
See you, Spence. Be good.
I grabbed the laptop and headed for the door.
Oh, you know I will.
I heard him call as the door to his apartment closed behind me. Once I was back home, I sipped some green tea, hoping to fend off sleep just a little longer. It was time to get to work. I took a big sip and logged into the laptop. The background was a picture of a young woman with long, flowing chestnut hair standing next to a river. A kayak and a rucksack lay on the bank nearby. She wore Oakleys and had a wide, bright smile. It matched a similar picture that her mother had texted me earlier. I clicked through a few documents that were saved to her desktop. More notes on journalism and a PDF of her current class schedule. I opened up the Finder and browsed through more of the same. Papers on a myriad of current events and one on climate change. A couple interesting pieces on criminology, but nothing out of the ordinary. I clicked the color wheel for photos. It looked like it was linked to her cell phone. Good. I scrolled through a sea of selfies and vacation pictures until I came to some taken from earlier this month. There were many shots of an older woman with very short, neat gray hair wearing an expensive suit and heels. She was attractive for her age, and it was obvious she had had some work done. Her ample cleavage hung out of her gray blazer as she leaned against a Range Rover, speaking to a very muscular bald man in dark sunglasses. Then there were pictures taken from the inside of a car, looking out upon a few people dressed in black robes. They were gathered around what looked to be an abandoned warehouse. I couldn't make out the area. It was unfamiliar to me. The timestamp was Sunday, April 16th at 7:42 p.m. My pulse quickened as I flipped through more pictures of the exterior of the building. She had a close-up of what appeared to be a chalk drawing of two circles conjoined in the middle to form an eternity loop that was on the center of a door. A few more were through a window that was lined with dust. It was hard to see, but I could just make out the outlines of at least a dozen people in black robes. One person in particular stood out among the abyss. The same short-haired woman from before was wearing bright purple robes with a golden fringe and was standing in front of what looked like an altar of some sort. I couldn't see any other details, but it was definitely her, and that was the last picture on Natalie's iCloud. Timestamped Sunday, April 16th at 8:13 p.m. I closed out of her photos and opened up her browsing history, ignoring older searches and focusing on the last 2 weeks. Social media, university login, porn, and here we go, Church of the Void. There was a bullshit webpage that described finding your purpose within the service of the void. Join us in a pursuit of happiness, non-dualism, and the oneness of mankind. There were no other tabs, just a mission statement. Useless. But a few links down was a forum page for the same church. Luckily, her username and password autofilled. I clicked the login button and was met with a very rudimentary chat forum. It looked like something I'd have seen in the very early 2000s. I spent the next few hours digging, finding almost nothing other than the fact that the people of this cult like to end their comments with, "We are one with the void, and the void is one with us." They spoke in code. Hardly anything was plain speak. I could only get bits and pieces here and there. Natalie must have figured out a way to crack it though somehow. There was a bit of buzz in the chat right around last weekend on a thread about a meetup. Unfortunately, I couldn't decipher the details on the location, but it seemed like there was to be a door or gateway of some sort opening, whatever that meant. I was tired and frustrated, so I decided to throw a Hail Mary and post a comment, hoping someone would bite. Maybe I would get lucky. I parroted language I'd seen them use on other threads as best I could to hide my deceit. "Praise be to the void. May it open fully and cleanse this realm. Sunday was as foretold, eternal. When may we be graced again?" I hit send, leaned back and rubbed my temples, trying to make sense of everything. I ran through a bullet list of what I knew in my head. College girl goes missing. Evidence shows probable cause is an involvement with the occult. Why was she there? Most likely because she's majoring in investigative journalism. She was a snoop. Common sense would dictate that either the church discovered that fact and took her against her will, or that she was scared of something she saw and is in hiding. No leads on the latter, so I need to pursue the former. No addresses, names, or contact information for the church. Only one known face of the organization, the old woman with the perky rack. Next steps, hope someone replies to my comment first and foremost, but additionally go and see the best friend, see if she knows anything. I sighed and closed the laptop. It was nearly 3 a.m., and I needed to be up in a few hours. I wanted to catch the best friend at the university before her first class. I shuffled to the bed like the undead and plopped on top of the comforter, too tired to even remove my shoes. Shortly after my head hit the pillow, sleep washed over me in a warm wave. Wind whipped across my face as trees rushed by in a blur. My Honda shadow rumbled beneath me as we roared down State Route 127. Evie's hands were in places they shouldn't have been as she screamed for me to go faster. Gin and cocaine flooded my system with all those good feelings that I craved. And beneath all that was an overt sense of invincibility. I felt like I'd never die, like I was a god. But the truth of mortality came to find me. Just like Icarus, I'd flown too close to the sun. A sharp curve that I didn't remember manifested just over a hill. I tried to hit the brakes, but it was too late. I was only able to slow down to about 60 when I laid the bike down. Evie flew over me and landed somewhere down the road as my head smacked the pavement enough times that I was pretty sure my brain had been turned into Swiss cheese. I tried to call out to her to see if she was all right, but I couldn't speak. Darkness crept into the corner of my vision. I tried to resist it, but it was all-consuming. I thought I'd died, but suddenly I was weightless and without pain. I hovered over my body, floating somehow. Evie. I immediately tried to swim through the air towards her. I could see her lying in a puddle of blood a few hundred feet away. I kicked my legs as hard as I could, but I couldn't get close to her. Something was pulling me in the other direction. I flipped over to my back and craned my neck and saw a dozen silhouettes of black robes motioning for me to join them. I resisted and backpedaled, but it was futile. Their hands were only blood and bone, not an inch of flesh on their fingers. They pulled at my clothing, bringing me down to rest on an altar made from stone. I screamed, but was met with only silence. The sound had been snuffed out from my lungs. My body thrashed against the altar, but nothing I did would loosen their grip. Suddenly, from somewhere deep inside the darkness of their hoods, they began to chant, "We are one with the void, and the void is one with us. We are one with the void, and the void is one with us." A great vibration rose up through my body. rattling the teeth in my skull. I tried to call out, to beg them to stop, but I had no voice. Suddenly, a woman in purple robes appeared. Her hood was down. She was older but beautiful. I knew her, but I wasn't sure how. She chanted with the others as she came to straddle me. Her eyes turned milky white as her pupils rolled into the back of her head. I was terrified, but somehow strangely comforted by her touch. She smelled of something sickly sweet, like a fruit that had gone rotten. This is what death smelt like. It was an odd thought, but it felt like a truth all the same. She opened up her robe and dropped it around her waist to reveal large breasts and a tattoo of writing in a language I didn't recognize across her stomach. The woman leaned down and whispered something in my ear, but I couldn't understand it. It sounded like a series of otherworldly noises. She then sat up straight, brought her index finger to her skin, and sliced herself open from neck to navel with her nail. I gasped and braced myself for the gore that was surely to follow, but none came. Instead, a tremendous glow flooded out from the incision, chasing away the darkness that lay around the altar. I looked to her face, but it was withered almost completely away. She was a husk now, a vessel for the light. I reached my hands into the meat of her chest and pulled her ribcage open like a door. The light overtook me as I felt myself swallowed into the void that lay beyond it. I awoke, gasping for breath. My throat was on fire, and my lungs felt like they were full of water. I rolled to the edge of the bed, hacking, heaving. I couldn't catch my breath. It felt like I was drowning. My heart thundered in my chest like a war drum. It was a panic attack, a bad one. I tried to stifle the fear and control the situation with my breathing exercises. In, then out. In, then out. I focused on the manual breathing, tuning out everything. In, then out. In, then out. After a few minutes, I was able to get my shit together enough to know I wasn't dying. The dream had seemed so real. From the horror of reliving my accident, all the way to the indescribable sense of relief that I had felt when I'd gone through the portal and into the void. All of my pain and suffering was lifted in an instant. It was unbelievable. I shook it off. I had to. The beauty and terror of the dream was just that, a dream. I repressed it, like I had so many other things. The smell of coffee wafted into my bedroom. I quickly changed clothes and grabbed the biggest mug I had, filling it to the top. I took a huge sip as I fired up the laptop on the kitchen island. Spencer Rules 99. Enter. I refreshed the forum and logged in again. The same outdated website loaded, but this time I had an exclamation point in the upper right-hand corner. A notification. I clicked it, which took me to my posted comment. The response was a geo-coordinate with a / dividing a date and time. 042323-2100. Tomorrow at 9 p.m. Holy shit, I whispered, taking another gulp of coffee. I Googled the coordinates. Seemed like it was a drop point in the middle of the desert, about 20 miles outside of Roswell, New Mexico. Google Maps showed some sort of lone structure, a decrepit white building. It almost looked like an old Catholic church you would have seen in a Western movie back in the 70s. That was a 6-hour flight and way out of my comfort zone. But I felt like I was in too deep now. There was no way I could just walk away at this point. I had to see it through, for Natalie, but also for myself. After that dream, well, I wanted to see it. No, I needed to see it. See the void. I needed to know if it was real, and if it wasn't, I still needed to find Natalie, and the church was my best and only lead. On the way to the university, I'd given Mrs. Blake an update on what I'd found and asked for approval for some additional travel expenses. After learning her intuition had been right, she eagerly approved. I felt like the case was reaching its boiling point. I could feel the conclusion coming just around the bend, but I wanted to tie up one last loose end and speak to Heather Morris, Natalie's best friend. Surely she knew something.
I have to be in class in 10 minutes. It's an exam, and the lit professor is a real dick. He'll lock me out. I understand. This won't take long.
Heather shuffled anxiously, covering the front of her body with a textbook. I wasn't sure if it was because she really needed to get to class, or if she just didn't want to talk to me. Probably a mix of both.
When was the last time you saw Natalie?
I took out a pad and a pen from my jacket pocket. I didn't need it, but I learned over the years that it made nervous people more relaxed. I had a habit of staring too intensely, reading body language and watching the eyes closely, which made people like Heather squirm. This forced me to focus more on the paper than the person.
Saturday for lunch. Where? Hector's. It's a taco shop down on 5th.
I scribbled down the details that I'd never look at again.
Did Natalie seem upset or distraught at all?
I glanced up and watched Heather furrow her brow.
Not really upset. Just distracted. Did she say anything about going anywhere? Or that she might not be able to be contacted for a few days? No,
she muttered, taking a pause. I held the pen to the pad, waiting for her to continue.
Look, this is about that cult, right? The one she's been investigating?
She made her fingers in quotation marks.
It could be.
I raised an eyebrow.
All right, I'll cut the bullshit because I've got to get to my exams.
She sighed and then took a deep breath.
Natalie wanted to do her thesis paper on this cult she found online. She thought it sounded interesting, but I told her it was super weird and she should drop it. But she went on and on about how she was going to be this awesome investigative journalist one day, blah, blah, blah.
Heather rolled her eyes as I put the notepad away.
Anyway, she told me she was getting close to a breakthrough. She'd found where they were going to meet or something. Listen, I told her not to go. I really did.
Did she say where they were meeting? I asked.
No. Every time she went into detail about it, I told her I didn't want to hear it. It creeped me out, gave me the heebie-jeebies.
She shuddered and made a sour face.
And you haven't heard from her since? No. Is she okay?
Heather's face suddenly grew sullen.
I'm sure she is, don't worry. I'm on it. But hey, if she contacts you at all, I want you to call me, okay?
I flashed a smile, trying to ease the tension. She nodded her head in agreement and took a business card from my hand.
I've really got to get to class. It's on the other side of campus.
She tucked the card in her back pocket and took a few steps back. I told her I understood and waved her on her way. She scampered across the lawn, her red hair flowing behind her in a crimson wave. No new information, just a confirmation on my lead to investigate the church further. I let out a sigh. Guess it was time to catch a flight to New Mexico. A dust devil swirled to my left down the path to the old church. A light breeze did nothing to cool down the intense heat of the desert. The only thing living for miles were sporadic groves of cacti and patches of sagebrush. I'd caught the red-eye flight into Roswell and managed a few hours of sleep at the hotel before making my way to the coordinates. I was exhausted, but the possibility of unraveling the case before the day was over gave me enough adrenaline to keep going. I had parked the rental car a couple miles down the road, hoping they wouldn't be coming from the southern route and instead arriving from the north like I had. It made sense if they were flying into Roswell as well, which was the only airport nearby. I hid behind the remnants of a well that had long since dried out. It was about 100 yards out from the church and encased in brick about 3 feet up, just enough for me to sit behind if I slouched a little. It wasn't great as far as hiding places went, but it was all I had. Within an hour, I heard tires crunching over displaced gravel. I mouthed a silent thank you because my ass had gone painfully numb. I transitioned to a prone position and looked around the side of the well just enough to get a good view. 2 large black Escalades had parked just in front of the building. People in black robes poured out of the vehicles and made their way inside. I couldn't make out any faces. Their hoods were up. I recalled remnants of my dream. It made me uneasy, but there was no supernatural pull towards them, just the opposite. My legs twitched with the desire to run in the other direction, but I willed them to stay. After the others had gone inside, the large bald man I'd seen in Natalie's pictures exited the driver's side and assisted the woman in the purple robes out of the vehicle. It was her, the woman from the photos, the woman from my dream. My pulse quickened and my mouth went dry. They paused to talk for a minute before making their way to the church, disappearing behind the sand-stained door. I gave them 10 minutes to get settled before I began a tactful crawl to the rear of the building. I slid up the brittle vinyl siding and peeked in the window. It was almost identical to the same scene that was pictured on the laptop. Black silhouettes sat in pews as the woman in purple motioned her arms over a stone altar. I reached into my pocket to retrieve my cell phone, but just as I pulled it out to take some pictures, I felt something heavy smack against the back of my skull. I went down like a sack of bricks and was out before I even hit the ground.
Tony.
I tried to open my eyes. The light was bright, causing my head to throb.
Where am I?
I murmured as I came to.
You're in the church.
My eyelids sprung open. It was the woman in the purple robes. She was sitting on the edge of the altar, running her hand through my hair. I quickly rolled off the stone and backed myself against the far wall. The sun shone through stained glass windows, bouncing refracted lights off a dozen black hoods. My breathing turned ragged. I suddenly felt like I was suffocating.
It's okay, Tony. Just breathe. Do your breathing exercises.
She held her hands up to show she meant no harm as she inched towards me.
Stay back!
I began to wheeze. Panic became a vice grip, constricting my windpipe.
Just breathe,
she whispered. In, then out. In, then out. She did the exercise with me. How could she have known about them? It was both terrifying and strangely comforting.
Where's Natalie?
I croaked after finally calming down enough to speak.
She's here.
The woman pointed to a black hood in the front row. The figure stood and then slowly pulled back its hood. My stomach did a flip in my abdomen as I recognized the face to be that of Natalie Blake. The young woman I'd been trying to find gave me a smile before pulling her hood back up and sitting once more.
What the hell?
I stammered. This didn't make sense.
Now listen, Tony. I'm going to show you something because I think you're finally ready to see it. But I need you not to panic, all right? Can you do that for me?
The woman asked. I nodded my head, but not sure if I could. She brought up her hand and snapped her fingers. And when she did, the entire congregation of hooded figures disappeared. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react further, she snapped again, and the entire building around us disappeared. We were standing outside in the desert.
Whoa! 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 What the fuck?
She snapped again, and we were suddenly in my apartment back in Cincinnati, standing in my kitchen. I patted my chest and arms, making sure I hadn't dematerialized or worse, but I was fully intact. The woman in front of me was now in professional business attire, like in the photos.
What in God's name is happening?
I demanded, bracing myself on the counter and feeling as if I might vomit.
This place is not what you think it is, Tony. This is an in-between place, and you've been here for almost a year.
She paced to the other side of the kitchen, retrieving a glass from the cupboard and filling it with water.
What the hell are you talking about?
She handed me the glass, and I reluctantly took a drink with shaky hands.
You died, Tony. You never made it out of that accident.
Her eyes grew soft, full of sympathy.
No. I'm right here. Yes, but you are also here, and very much dead.
My knees wobbled. I felt them give out as I began to fall. But after another snap of the fingers, I found myself caught by a park bench. My vision swam for a moment, but then steadied. We were sitting somewhere familiar. Pine trees ran in a line to my right, and then a lovely cottage sat just ahead of us. The smell of honeysuckle and lavender filled my nostrils. We were at Mrs. Blake's residence out in the country. The in-between place is somewhere souls get stuck sometimes, when they refuse to let go and move on to the next plane, she explained.
I died?
My voice sounded small even to me.
Yes.
Oh. I didn't know what to say. What she was talking about sounded absolutely insane, but somehow, somewhere deep down, I knew her words were true. You've been punishing yourself, holding on to the guilt of your accident that killed Evelyn, and it's been keeping you from moving on. Is Evie here too? Oh yes. Why? She's not ready either. She's holding on to too much anger and pain. Where is she? In her version of this place. It looks different to everyone. She's been bleeding over to your reality of the in-between, trying to lash out at you. But I honestly believe if you move on, then so will she. At least, that is my hope for her. I didn't know what to say. I took a moment to try and comprehend the massive unveiling of my death and the afterlife that followed. It was heavy. So all this, the case, everything was fake? Yes. I realized the best way to help you move on was to give you one last case to solve. The dream you had was to help you accept the truth. Are you deaf? I asked. I've been called that, although I'm more of a guide. Huh. It was odd, but once I quit questioning everything, it felt a little peaceful. Walk with me. She stood and held out her hand. I took it, and she laced her fingers in mine. We walked for a while along the pines as she answered more of my questions, explaining everything patiently, like a school teacher would to a child. So what now? I asked. She kissed my forehead and drew a circle in the air, then snapped her fingers. A brilliant light spilled out from it for a moment before clearing. It was a portal to the other side. Stars glistened as comets streaked through time and space. I could see planets, one filled with rich red sand, another with a surface covered in vibrant blue waters. The beauty, it was too much. I couldn't help but sob. It was overwhelming. Go on. Time to return to the star, she whispered. That same irresistible pull from my dream drew me forward. But this time, I didn't resist. I crawled through the portal, and suddenly I was weightless. Suddenly I was free. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.